Hello, my name is Tamara Garcia and I would like to welcome you to our IVDR webinar. With this webinar, we would like to inform you about the medical device certification DEKRA can offer you. Please ask any questions you have during this webinar, but note that we are not allowed to perform any kind of consulting. During the webinar, the microphones will be muted. However, you can ask your questions via the chat box. We have colleagues here available who can answer your questions during the presentations. And if time allows us, then we'll zoom in on your questions at the end of the presentation. Also note that the webinar will be recorded and made available afterwards. So let's look at the agenda. First, we will start with an introduction of DEKRA, followed by audits presented by Freddy Goddeke. Technical file review will be presented by Liz Gommans, and in the end, we will zoom in on your questions. So let's start a little bit about DEKRA as an introduction. We were established in 1925, so nearly 100 years old. And DEKRA is a global leader in testing, inspection, and certification in numerous technology fields and industry sectors. So DEKRA's mission is to contribute to a safe, secure, and sustainable world. And we have more than 48,000 colleagues working in 60 countries. The services we provide are vehicle inspection, claims and expertise, digital and product solutions, where we are at with the medical devices, industrial inspection, advisory and training services, audit, and temporary work. And DEKRA is strong in innovating safety and security. So we are building on a strong portfolio of sustainability and high-tech services like cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, and connectivity throughout all technology fields and industry sectors. I think it's good to mention that we are also preparing, and next to the IVDR webinars, webinars for artificial intelligence. As you probably know, different competent authorities are now working on requirements for notified bodies handling artificial intelligence as a medical device. So once more is published, we will certainly provide you with more information and background on that. So if you would like to be updated on that, please send your send an email to medical.global@dekra.com and we'll keep you in the loop. Let's now zoom in on the medical device certification itself. So the services we provide, I think, we will stick to the mainstream for now. We provide services for CE, IVDR, MDR, UKCA, ISO 13485 certification. That's a QMS certification and medical device single audit program. And maybe it's good to briefly touch on the last one. MDSAP is built on the ISO 13485, but with some additional requirements of the regulatory authority participating in this program. And the initiative is aimed at boosting efficiency and safety through increased consistency. It is mandatory if you place your product on the Canadian market, and it benefits entry for Australia, Japan, Brazil, and the US. Medical device certification globally. So within DEKRA, we have 2 notified bodies and 1 approved body. One notified body is situated in Germany. We are in the Netherlands, and we have branch offices in the UK, in the US, in Israel, China, and Japan. And we also have an approved body in the UK. So the notified body and approved body work in close harmony to provide mutual certification schemes, and we aim to provide the service regionally. More about steps towards product certification under the IVDR. Basically, the first step is to send an inquiry to medical.global@dekra.com you will receive a company information form. We ask you to send us the populated forms, and then we will respond by a pre-application, might be combined with a meeting, and we will send you an indication of the cost and the timelines. When you then choose DEKRA, we ask you to submit an application form, and we ask you some more in-depth information regarding your technical file, but also your QMS. And at that point, a project manager will be assigned to you. I think that's one of the main benefits when working with DEKRA. You will have a project manager who you can always, who is your first point of contact, and you can always ask him or her a question or start a new process. The application review will then be done, and we will establish a certification agreement between you and us, and we will start scheduling the technical documentation review and the audit activities. Now, the technical documentation will take place off-site, and we will have an on-site audit at the manufacturer, and if deemed necessary, also an on-site audit at the critical supplier. When both the audit and the technical review are finalized with satisfactory results, the verification of compliance by DEKRA certification management will take place, and in the end, the issuance of the certificates. I would like to point out that the whole process can be performed quite swift, because we currently have sufficient available resources. So achieving certification in a couple of months should be feasible. And rather than mentioning timelines, I would like to point out that in the end, it depends really on the quality of your technical file, your QMS, and your ableness to respond to any questions we have in a rapid pace. That really makes the difference. Except for Class D devices, of course, because that takes more time. Please also note that we recently hosted webinars on how to set up your technical file, and we have also some guidelines available. So if you are interested, please let us know. Then it's maybe good to briefly touch on the proposal for the IVDR extension. Important is the validity of the certificate. Was it valid on the date of publication? If so, then we look at the classification. For Class D, IVDD, Annex List A, List B, and self-test, the QMS needs to be compliant by May 2025. The application needs to be submitted by May 2025, and the agreement needs to be signed later that year in September. Then the product can be placed on the market or put into service until December 2027. If you then look into Class C, the QMS needs to be compliant also by May 2025. The application submitted needs to be performed by May 2026, and the agreement signed needs to be done September 2026. And then also in this case, the products can be placed on the market or put into service, but then until December 2028. For Class A sterile and Class B, the QMS also needs to be compliant May 2025. The application should be submitted by May 2027, and the agreement signed later this year, September 2027. And for these products, they can then be placed on the market or put into service until December 2029. If there is no valid certificate, then following will happen. We will look whether the certificate was valid on May 2022. If yes, we then set up an agreement with the notified body signed before expiry date of the certificate, then the extension can be used. If not, then we look at whether the derogation is granted in accordance with Article 54 or 92. If yes, the extension can be used. If not, the extension cannot be used. So with this, I'm at the end of my part of the presentation. Thank you for listening, and I would like to hand over to my colleague Freddie, who will share some information on audits.
Thank you, Tamara. Now it's my turn to explain something about the audit process within DEKRA. If there are any questions during my presentation, please don't hesitate to enter your questions in the chat box. First of all, I would like to start with some possible situations which could be applicable for your company before or after application at DEKRA. It could be possible that you don't have any certifications yet. So you don't have ISO 13485 certification for your QMS, you don't have IVDD certification or IVDR certification. In this case, we strongly recommend to combine your initial IVDR certification together with an ISO 13485 certification. It's not more expensive to combine these two different certification schemes. It could also be possible that you already have ISO certification at a different certifier. Please note that we strongly recommend in this case to transfer your current ISO certificates to DEKRA and combine it with an IVDR certification or with IVDD certification. The transfer process is not a difficult process and will not take that much time to transfer your certificates to DEKRA. The benefit for you as a manufacturer is that then you only have one audit, combined audit, ISO audit with IVDR, and not two separate auditors, for instance, an audit from your previous certifier and an audit from a notified body. It could also be possible that you already have IVDD CE certification, so certification for one of the products which are included on list A or list B of the current IVDD. Please note that after official publication of the current proposal for extension of the IVDR, it's also possible to transfer the IVDD surveillance activities to DEKRA and combine them with either an IVDR audit or ISO audits. Then it could be possible that you already have IVDR CE certification at another notified body. In this case, it's also possible to transfer your current IVDR certificates to DEKRA. The last possibility is that you are on a waiting list at another notified body. Please note that it's still possible to transfer to DEKRA because there is no waiting list at this time at DEKRA. The audit process starts with a so-called client medical test plan, a CMTP. The client medical test plan, it's an internal DEKRA document. Unfortunately, it's not shared with our customers. And it's all includes all certification activities for at least one certification cycle. A certification cycle covers the validity term of a certificate. In case of ISO, the maximum validity of a certificate is 3 years. In case of CE certification, it's 5 years. In case if there is no certification yet, we will have to do a so-called stage 1 and stage 2 audit. The stage 1 audit is preferably performed on-site and will take, in general, 1 man-day. I will explain later on in this presentation the content and the goals of a stage 1 audit. After successful completion of a stage 1 audit, we will have to do a stage 2 audit, which is an on-site audit, and the duration will depend on the FTE count of your company. After successful completion of a stage 2 audit, you will receive your certificates. In case of transfer of current certificates, we need to do a phase 1 review, which is an off-site review for, in general, just half a man-day time. The content and the requirements for a phase 1 transfer review, I will also explain later on during this presentation. As a result of a phase 1 transfer review, it's also possible that we have to do a phase 2 transfer audit. And it's also an on-site audit, and the duration will also depend on the FTE count of your company. Once you have completed these phase 1 with or without a phase 2, we will issue the certificates, and we have to perform surveillance activities. Part of these surveillance activities are annual surveillance audits. Every year there will be a surveillance audit. For ISO, as I already explained, the validity of a certificate is maximum 3 years. So after initial certification, the first year will be the first surveillance audit, then the second year surveillance audit 2, and then the third year you have to undergo a renewal audit to reissue your current ISO certificate. The topics which are going to be covered during the surveillance audit are mentioned in a so-called audit matrix, audit program matrix. The audit program matrix will be documented within the audit reports which you will receive after a stage 2 audit. Then the question, when can you combine or when can you undergo an initial IVDR audit? So it is possible to combine an IVDR audit together with an ISO stage 2 audit, together with a surveillance audit or renewal audit, and it's even possible to do a separate IVDR audit. So if you want an IVDR audit in between, or just an IVDR audit without ISO audits, then this is also possible. Then the audit types. First, I would like to start with the transfer of ISO certificates. As I already explained, we have to do an offsite phase 1 transfer review. For this transfer review, we need information from you as a manufacturer. We need all the audit reports from the current certification cycle. So this will be the report since the previous renewal audit or since the initial audit, whichever is applicable. We will need your quality manual. We will need the valid certificates, so your current valid certificates. It's only possible to transfer valid certificates. If the certificates are expired, we cannot transfer these certificates and you have to apply for initial certification. We will need all the information related to previous engagements with regulatory bodies that could impact the QMS certification, like suspensions, vigilance cases, etc. And we also need the critical subcontractor information. Critical subcontractors are subcontractors who are performing some processes which are covered by the scope of your ISO certificate, for instance, design and development and manufacturing processes. We will need a documented consent that we are allowed to contact your former certifier, and we will need some evidence that you are a legal entity, that your company is a legal entity. Registration in the Chamber of Commerce could be sufficient to prove that you are a legal entity. The reason for this is that we are only allowed to issue certificates to legal entities. Once we have received all this information, we can do a so-called transfer review, and it results in a transfer review report. The conclusion in this transfer review report can be different. In the most cases, there will be no questions and there will be no non-conformities, and we can issue your certificates, your new certificates from DEKRA, and continue with your current certification cycle. The second possibility is that there are questions raised during the transfer review, and or there are non-conformities raised during the transfer review. Then we need to close first all the questions and the non-conformities together with you, and then we can issue the certificates and continue with the certification cycle. It could also be possible that we need to do a phase 2 transfer audit. And then we can issue the certificates and continue with the certification cycle after successful completion of this audit. The last possibility is that there are concerns, and concerns could be about your previous certifier, but also about your organization. And then it's unfortunately not possible to transfer the certificates, but you have to apply for initial certification and undergo a stage 1 and stage 2 audit. The stage 2 ISO audit, the goals of this audit are to understand your understanding as a manufacturer of the aspects of the standards which are related to identification of key performance measures, objectives, and risk associated with your processes. During this audit, we also evaluate your internal audit process and the management review process, and also the output of these processes to determine the readiness for a certification audit, so the stage 2 audit. For this topic, we need a full cycle of the internal audits performed by your company, and also there should be one management review performed before we can go to a stage 2 audit. During this stage 1 audit, we will also review your management system documentation to verify that the required procedures by the standard have been put in place. And we will agree on the audit matrix, like I already explained before, that the audit matrix will cover all the processes which are performed within your company. And we will discuss also the planning for a stage 2 audit. The results of this stage 1 audit are going to be documented in a so-called stage 1 audit report, and there could be areas of concerns identified during a stage 1 audit. We call them areas of concerns, since it's not possible to raise non-conformities during this audit because there is no certification yet. So these are so-called areas of concerns, and these areas of concerns needs to be addressed before we can go to a stage 2 audit. Otherwise, these areas of concerns can result in non-conformities during a stage 2 audit. The stage 2 audit can be combined with or without an IVDR audit. And it's important to know that there should be at least 1 month in between a stage 1 audit and a stage 2 audit. And that the certification decision should be taken within 12 months after the start of the audit activities. So that's after the start of the stage 1 audit. The topics which are going to be handled during a stage 2 audit is the management system document review, which will cover class 4 of the ISO standard. So we will take a look at your quality manual, for instance. Then we will cover management responsibility, class 5 of the ISO standards, which includes quality policy, quality objectives, internal communication, management representative, management review, etc. Document and data control will be handled during a stage 2 audit. Resource management, calibration maintenance are included during resource management. Also competence and qualifications, computerized system management, infrastructure, environmental control are topics which are going to be handled during resource management audits. Customer processes includes order processing, for instance, and customer property. Then improvement processes, which include your internal audit process, your CAPA process, non-conforming products can be included, feedback processes are included. Design and development processes are handled during a stage 2 audit, if applicable for your company. So if there is design and development within the proposed scope of your certificate, we will cover design and development. Likewise for product realization processes. And if you are combining your initial ISO audit together with an IVDR audit, we need to cover CE-specific topics, and we need to add CE-specific topics during the audit. These CE-specific topics include purchasing controls, supply management, which are treated according ISO 13485 requirements. Also, production and process controls are CE-specific topics, which are also treated according ISO 13485 requirements. But during this process, there will be a specific focus on compliance with the GSPRs, which are applicable for the manufacturing processes. Design and development is covered during CE-specific topics, also treated according ISO 13485, but there will be a specific focus on the specific topics mentioned in the IVDR, for instance, the documented strategy for regulatory compliance. Risk management is covered during CE-specific topics. Risk management is extensively reviewed during the tech file review, but risk management applies throughout the whole lifetime of the device. So that's why it's also covered during audits. And we will take a look at your risk management process. We will focus on the risk management process and the sources, for instance, which are used as input for your risk management. Think about PMS, for instance, which is an important source, and how results of the PMS are, how your risk management documentation is updated with the results of your PMS. Vigilance is CE-specific topics, which is going to be handled during IVDR. Also, trend reporting is a CE-specific topic of the IVDR. So-called CE-specific subjects. Think about, for instance, the PRC, person responsible for regulatory compliance, UDR requirements, translation requirements, registration requirements, document retention, state-of-the-art of QMS aspects are all handled during the CE-specific subjects. The performance evaluation process will be handled during CE-specific topics. There will be mainly focus on the performance evaluation process, because the performance evaluation plan and also the performance evaluation report will be reviewed during the tech file review. PMS, post-market surveillance and post-market surveillance follow-up will be included during the IVDR specific topics. There will be mainly focus on the processes, but it's also possible that the PMS report in case of Class B devices will be reviewed during surveillance audits or during renewal audits, and also the periodic safety upgrade report for instance, which are applicable for Class C devices. For Class D devices, the periodic safety update report, there's a requirement that you should submit the PSER annually to your notified body. So the PSER for Class D devices will be reviewed offsite, but it is possible that the PSER for Class C devices or the PMS report for Class B devices are going to be reviewed during an audit. Batch release process will be covered during audits. This is only applicable for Class D devices, and the real-time stability monitoring process. And this is only applicable if the devices were initially certified with a shelf life claim based on accelerated stability studies. Then, after you have received the certificate, we have to perform, as I already mentioned, annual surveillance audits with or without an IVDR audit. The annual surveillance audits are always scheduled within 10 to 14 months after the previous audit, and not all topics are going to be covered, or it's not mandatory to cover all the topics during a surveillance audit. For instance, the only topics which are mandatory and will be included every surveillance audit are the management responsibilities and the improvement processes. The rest of the topics could be possible that not all topics will be handled every audit. But you will see in the audit matrix which topics are going to be covered during which audits. Same for the IVDR specific topics, is that not all the topics will be covered every audit. The only mandatory topics which are going to be covered every audit are the PMS and the post-market surveillance follow-up, and also the batch release and the real-time stability monitoring process, if applicable. Then, after you have undergone a full cycle, and after 3 years for ISO and 5 years for CE certification, you have to undergo a renewal certification. And during this renewal certification, the same topics are going to be handled as during an initial audit. So we will go to cover all the topics of the audit matrix. And a renewal audit should be at least performed 3 months before the expiry of your certificate. And this is because that for a renewal audit, the reports has to go through our internal review processes, and this will take some time. So it's needed to do renewal audit at least 3 months before the certificate expiry date. Then post-audit activities. After the audit, you will receive a so-called audit summary report and an NC report, if applicable. It could also be applicable that you will only receive an audit summary report and that there will be no non-conformities during an audit. In those reports, you will find an audit conclusion, a certification recommendation. This could be renewal or continuation of current certification. And you will also find the audit findings, and this could be minor or major findings. In this audit summary report, you will also find the agreed actions. Then the post-audit activities expected from you as manufacturers, that you will submit a corrective action plan for the non-conformities which are issued during the audit, and this has to be done in general within 30 days as of the last audit day. We'll expect implementation of corrections and corrective actions for the non-conformities, and for major non-conformity this has to be done within 90 days as of the last audit days, and for minor non-conformities you have to perform the implementation or complete the implementation of corrective and corrective actions within 6 months of the last audit day. Please note that if there are major non-conformities during initial audits or during renewal audits, this can hold up certification decisions. And we also expect after each audit that you will respect the timelines which are agreed upon for the different actions which are included in a report. After we have completed all the post-audit activities, you will receive a final report and, if applicable, a final non-conformity report with the certification recommendation, with the audit matrix, which I already explained, and also the status of the non-conformities issued, if applicable. Then there are different audit types and special audits. For instance, according to the IVDR Annex 9 and Annex 11, we need to perform unannounced audits at your facility. These unannounced audits need to be performed at least every 5 years, and these audits will be performed by 1 or by 2 auditors. And during these audits, there will be focus on the technical documentation of the devices and the production process of the devices. Subcontractor audits could be a possibility which we need to do. So if there are activities, manufacturing activities or design and development activities outsourced to subcontractors, then it could be possible that we as a notified body would like to audit the subcontractor or need to audit the subcontractor. This is only related to the CE certification. Then corrective and preventive actions audit is possible. And this is only in case of a high number of non-conformities during an audit, and there will be only a follow-up of non-conformities of the previous audit during a corrective and preventive audit. And then there are the so-called special audits. Special audits are, in the most cases, it's in case of major changes like new facilities or moving to a new facility, and then we will need to do a special audit to certify or to include new facility within the certificate. Then at last, I would like to explain something about the audit team. Our audit teams consist of experienced auditors with a demonstrated experience and knowledge of the devices and the technologies. The size of the audit team depends on the audit duration, which is calculated based on the FTE count of your company. And it could also be applicable that there are other complexities like a high number of devices covered by the certifications, the type of devices, performance of the QMS during previous audits could be a complexity which leads to an increase of audit time. If there is good performance, there could be a decrease in audit time. And also special processes are taken into account to calculate the needed audit time. And for special processes, you have to think about, for instance, for freeze-drying processes, etc. Then we need to rotate. As auditors, we are not allowed to perform audits for more than 3 consecutive years. And all the communication about who's coming to your facility for an audit, so which audit is going to be scheduled, the timelines, the planning will all be arranged by our planning department of DEKRA. So that's the end of my presentation, and I would like to hand over to Liz. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Freddie. From this point, I will take over. So I will be talking about technical file reviews at DEKRA. So the amount of technical file reviews that we will review and which exact files we will be reviewing, that depends on the classification of your device, the intended use, but also on intended users of the device. Just a very high level overview here. So for class A sterile devices, we will be looking at all technical files, but only at the sterility related aspects. So it will be a limited review actually. Then for class B and C devices, it could be that sampling is applicable. You can have a look at it for yourself at MDCG 2019-13. There are the sampling rules listed. And yeah, so it depends a bit on the device. And for class B's and C's, also on intended users really, because for near patient testing, self-testing and companion diagnostics, we cannot do sampling. And then for class D's, we have to actually review at all technical files. There's no sampling possible here. So you might wonder within DEKRA what kind of people will be looking actually at my technical file. So within DEKRA, we are with a group of 20 IVDR qualified technical file reviewers, and we all have our own expertise. So some are, for example, more companion diagnostics oriented, others are more molecular biology oriented. So it depends a little bit. Yeah, we all have our different expertises. But next to that, we are all educated in a biochemistry related study. So either biochemistry, chemical biology, medical biology, veterinary surgeon, these kind of professions. We all worked with IVD medical devices for more than 4 years, so at least 4 years or longer. And next to that, we are all trained on regulation. We have a very extensive training within DEKRA related to the regulation. And to become a technical file reviewer, when you start, it will take on average over 1 year just to become a technical file reviewer. And next to that, we also have trainings on medical devices itself. So we have experts coming to DEKRA to inform us about the latest development for specific type of devices, about risks related to specific type of devices. So we are actually quite extensively trained. It's also, I think, good to mention for the IVDR group, we really have a dedicated team. So we have regular meetings, and if we are, as a technical file reviewer, a little bit in doubt about whether we should accept it or not, or we can discuss. We usually discuss with each other to have a common opinion about how we should take it further. So I think that's very valuable. And next to the technical file reviewer for class C and D devices, a medical expert will be involved. We have one clinical chemist working for DEKRA directly. And if he doesn't have the experience with a specific type of device or the knowledge, we go to external physicians or clinical chemists. They just work in the hospital and they do this part of the file review for us. So they will only be looking at the clinical study. So their focus is limited. So just a little bit about DEKRA itself. So DEKRA Netherlands BV is designated for both Annex 9 and Annex 10. DEKRA Germany is only designated for Annex 9. In total, we are designated for all IVDR codes except for one, which is IVD 4010. So these are the IVDs related to mycology. So if you have a device that really involves mycology, then probably we will not be the best notified body for you. However, for actually all other devices, we are able to do the certification, and we don't make their exceptions. So we also accept all Class D devices. There are no exceptions there. So once the technical file has been submitted to DEKRA, usually the review is performed within a few weeks. And then you will, as a manufacturer, you will get your first list of questions from us. I have to mention here at the moment we do not have any waiting lists. You can imagine that if all the manufacturers are waiting until the last moment, then that situation might change. So we would like to urge you to start now. Don't wait until the last moment. Just start now, submit your files, and get the certifications started. And then what does the technical documentation review process looks like at DEKRA? So step one, when we receive a file, technical file, step one is that a qualified technical reviewer will be assigned. So this depends on the NBOC, the IVDR codes that are connected to your device, and based on that, the technical file reviewer within DEKRA will be assigned. Then the technical file reviewer will first start with a quick scan. And there we just check, are all the documents there? Do we see, like within 2 minutes, there are any big gaps, these kind of things. We don't go into detail yet. It's just a general review to see if we have everything that we need in order to get the review started. If we are missing some documents there, or things are very unclear from the beginning that we need to, on which we need clarification before we can start the technical file review, you will get a form from us stating we need document A, B, and C, or we need additional clarification related to the intended purpose, these kind of things. So once that is all settled and we have everything, we actually start with the review themselves. And depending on your device, different people can be involved. So the technical file reviewer is always involved. There are no exceptions here. And then depending on the device, could be that we will involve a sterilization expert, clinical, software or AI, or we need to do consultation with the EMA or expert panel. And that all depends on the device and on the situation. Then, within a few weeks, you will get your initial report and or the list of questions. So the review is done, and we do the complete review, and then we generate there will be some questions for the manufacturer, and these will be sent then. And then usually you get into some rounds. So the manufacturer replies, we say it's acceptable or not, and from there we just continue until all questions are closed. And then once all questions are closed, we will finalize the report. The report will then go into an internal review process. So another file reviewer will just look at it to see if we didn't forget anything important, if it's all fine. And then if everything is fine, and we have, of course, a positive audit recommendation, we can issue the certificate. What is very important to mention here is that we are open for structured dialogue. So it's quite common that after the first list of questions has been sent to the manufacturer, we will plan a meeting with the technical file reviewer and your project manager. And we cannot do consultancy, that's without any doubt, but we can clarify what was meant by the questions or where they originate from, these kind of details, which might help you as a manufacturer to give proper answers to the questions again. So that speeds up the process. Once you filed your application with DEKRA, you will get the technical documentation customer guide. So this is our DEKRA guide, which includes several topics. They are listed here on the left. And the idea of this guidance is actually that it is an aid for you to structure your technical file. So if you will look into detail, this is just one page of this customer guide as an example. So here we have the risk management. We list some very common relevant standards and guidances. It's not a complete list because that always depends on the device and these kind of things, but it gives you an impression of what's required. Then we have the checklist here below. Which information do we need to see somewhere back in your technical file? And here on the right, you can list where we can find this in your technical file. So this will help you as a manufacturer to check if you have everything that we need in your technical file. And this will help us as a technical file reviewer to see where we can find everything back in your technical file, because that, if you have lots of documents, it sometimes can be challenging. I do not have the time to go into detail on every single topic of this guidance. I will just very briefly mention something about the scientific validity, analytical and clinical performance, because that is the body actually of your technical file. So just some very small lessons, small lessons. So some lessons that we have learned related to this section. So just what do we verify in this chapter? So as actually the name already says, we have the scientific validity, the analytical performance, and the clinical performance. Together, they will form your performance evaluation. The scientific validity is the association between an analyte and a clinical condition or a physiological state. The analytical performance is the ability of an IVD to correctly detect and measure what a specific analyte. And the clinical performance is the ability of the device to yield the correct results correlated to your clinical situation. So that is what we will be looking at in this chapter. So just very briefly what we would expect. So for scientific validity, we would expect here to see a systematic scientific literature review to demonstrate that your analyte really correlates to the clinical condition. You need to describe your search strategy in detail, and you have to justify why this is a good search strategy. And this should all be listed in your scientific validity report. One of the things with the scientific validity that is, it's good to keep this in mind, that sometimes in your intended use, you have more than one claim. So I have an example here to explain a little bit more in detail. So this is an intended purpose of some device. So we have the device ABC is a manual quantitative lateral flow immunoassay for aiding diagnosis and monitoring of gallbladder cancer patients in conjunction with a standard diagnostic procedure. The device can also be used for early detection of patients with symptoms of gallbladder cancer. It measures soluble fragments of analyte X in the urine, and the device for professional use only. So this is like a good intended purpose, but what is really in there, if you look in more detail, you see you have several claims. So you have diagnosis, monitoring, and early detection of gallbladder cancer patients. So what you have to demonstrate here in your scientific validity is that this marker, analyte X in your urine, is suitable for the diagnosis, monitoring, and early detection of gallbladder cancer. So you really have to demonstrate every claim that you make in your intended purpose. So it's important to be precise here. Then very briefly about the analytical performance. So in the IVDR, they correlate to the parameters described in section 9.1 of Annex 1. So I just made the list here. So your specimen type, accuracy, sensitivity, specificity, you can read it for yourself. What we would expect is we would expect a test plan and a test report for every analytical performance parameter. And that is the detail that we need as a file reviewer need to see. In the end, you have the summary of it all in the analytical performance report. It might be nice for you to realize at least that most technical file reviewers, they start with the analytical performance report, and from there we go back to all the specific test plans and test reports per parameter. So it's always nice if there is a link in your analytical performance report to all the test plans and the test reports, so we can find it back easily. Then the clinical performance. You also have to demonstrate this. This is extensively described in the IVDR. You need to have your clinical performance study plan, clinical performance study report, and then with either diagnostic sensitivity, diagnostic specificity, positive predictive value. So this really depends on your device, what is required and what is not. Actually, the same holds for the analytical parameters. I should have mentioned that there as well. Some are not applicable, that's fine, but even though it can be very obvious why it's not applicable, you have to provide a justification, because we as file reviewers, we are not allowed to make any assumptions. So you need to tell us. And sometimes, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but still you have to tell us, because we cannot make any assumptions. There are some cases where the clinical performance is not required, but then also you need to have a justification. And this will all be collected in a clinical performance report, which will be your output. Very briefly about some lessons learned. I think many IVD manufacturers have IVD devices that were initially developed under the IVDD. And for the clinical study, it's okay to use that data. You can definitely use that data. However, you have to make a gap assessment. So you still have to fulfill the requirements of the IVDR. So that means that you can check your data that was collected under the IVDD and see where the gaps are with the requirements for the IVDR, and you can fill in those gaps. Another important point here is that you should check if your device hasn't changed over time, because you can imagine if you have developed your device, say 30 years ago, you did your clinical study back then, and slowly in time you've made a change here and a change there and a change there. Make sure that the device that is now under review for IVDR certification, that the clinical data is except that you present that was developed 30 years ago is still applicable for this device. Could be that based on the changes, you have to do either some or the whole clinical study, you have to redo it. It really depends on the situation, but it's good to think about this up front. Just very brief, some useful guidance documents. So we have the Team MB Best Practice Guide, also about technical documentation, what you should submit, those kind of things, and MDCG 2022-2. It's a very nice MDCG document, and you would definitely read it. And for the Team MB Best Practice Guide, you can just Google. If you just copy the title and Google it, you will find it. Then just some general experience so far. So what we see now is that the most common reasons for delay is that we have an incomplete submission, so that we miss documents, these kind of things. Yeah, that's usually, of course, not so ideal. And the lack of cohesive structure, so that we just cannot really find things back. That's also will result in a lot of questions, causing lots of delay, which was not necessarily needed. Another thing that is important to mention is that your intended purpose is crucial. Think about your intended purpose very well before you start to prepare your technical file. Be precise, be complete, and also be consistent. Make sure your intended purpose is the same throughout the whole technical file. Because if your intended purpose is not clear, that will definitely result in a lot of questions, a lot of unclarities. So that's actually the basis of your technical file. Keep in mind that especially if it's the first technical file you are submitting to a notified body, 3 rounds of questions it's quite common. Just to see, we need to learn where we can find things. You can learn what we need to see. So it's just, after a few files you will get the feeling of it. But for the first technical file, usually 3 rounds of questions. It's really nothing new. And keep in mind, we all have the same goal. So we want to bring safe products onto the European market. So why would you choose for DEKRA? So we have over 30 years of notified body experience. We used to be a notified body for the IVDD. Now we went to the IVDR, so it's not new in that sense. We have over 150 qualified professionals. That's with MDR together. We have branch offices in 7 countries, as Samara told. Extensive IVD, the certification scope, so our scope is quite broad. Yeah, so, and I think one of the very important positive points of DEKRA is that we have project managers. So we have one single contact point to whom you can go and where you can ask your questions. Next to that, we have an extensive network of professionals, and we can do early stage assessment services like regulatory pathway review and a clinical protocol review. So I would like to mention, please do not postpone your submission. Yeah, if you're interested, you can mail us at medical.global@dekra.com. So thank you very much for your time. And I don't know if there are any questions in the chat. So thank you. Kijk, waar is mijn camera? Ik heb geen.
Ik krijg de camera niet aan. Oh,
ja. Yes. So thank you very much all for your time. So first, we only had 2 questions. I don't know if anybody else has some more questions. If so, please put them in the chat, and then we can answer them still now. Yeah, about the questions that we had. So it was about the guidance that we provide. And well, we give the guidance to help us and to help you to structure your technical file, but it's not a requirement. So you don't necessarily have to use this exact guidance. It will just speed up the process, basically. So yeah, if there are no other questions, then I would like to thank you for your time and mention once more, please submit, start to apply now. Don't wait too long. Now we have the time and the capacity available to help you. So thank you very much.